listening, but I'm just trying to,
I understand.
share.
Yep.
Uh, all right. We'll just give it a second to have everybody. I feel like this came up quicker than what I imagined it would come up. I felt like your interview was so far away, and then all of a sudden, here we are.
I know the feeling.
How come? Again, here we go. Okay, here we go. It says we're live. Hmm. Always. Okay, we have some people joining us. Hello, everybody. Uh, oh yeah, Jocelyn. Hello. Hi. All right. So it's not so. I'm very happy to have you on. It's my show is Paranormal Brew. However, I think the word paranormal uh, covers all aspects of the unknown, including um, what lies up in the sky, or you know, um, hi Sid. Um, that is not something that I know much about. Now, I am very interested in the subject and the research and everything that goes into it. It's one of those. I believe in when I say UFOs, because UFOs technically is what identify unidentified flying object, not necessarily saying it's an alien. Um, but I'm getting ahead of myself. I have ADD, so just let's start with you. Let's say, like, how did you get to where you are right now? Like, did you have an experience, and then from that because many of us have we'll have experiences with what we believe to be, ghosts or spirits, or somebody passes away. There's always a reason you get into, researching the one thing over the other. So did you, or were you just interested?
I became interested in my late 20s with the return of what was a profoundly affecting event in my childhood that I repressed. It was a very unambiguous daylight sighting of five silvery white disc shaped craft right over the area where I grew up on Long Island. I was born in New York City, lived there for most of my life, but it was something I witnessed with my sister Helen, and it was overwhelming to me. As a very straight and quite innocent little kid, I had zero interest in the subject really, except, the wonderful B movies that I would sometimes get to see at our local theater on a Saturday, that kind of thing. But it what it said to me was everything that you've intuited from the adult world, everything you thought was true is now open to question.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really too much for me to handle. Um, I joke with people sometimes that if I have other repressed memories from childhood, I don't remember them. But obviously, this is not some paranormal phenomena. People sadly have many repressed memories, often with much more conventional kinds of trauma. And it was a trauma for me. And the years went by, and almost a little more than 14 years passed until the memory reemerged one afternoon, and with a vengeance. And to abbreviate the story somewhat, I was quite overwhelmed. I can tell you why I think it happened, the return of the memory when it happened, but it's almost incidental to the fact that I guess I was ready to deal with it. I thought through what I should do, and having had a witness, and my sister Helen and I, who passed in 2000, were particularly close for siblings, both artists, writers. I was living in New York's Chinatown at the time. She was in the East Village. I called her, and told her I had recovered a memory from childhood and wanted to know if she remembered the same thing, but was concerned that if I simply told her the memory, she'd say yes or no. And I really would never know for sure if she remembered the same thing. So I set the scene, Taryn, the weather, the time of day where we were standing in relationship to each other, and she cut me off and said, "Stop, I know what you're talking about." And then pretty much verbatim told me what I remembered, with one variation. She wasn't sure whether it was 5 or 6, which we worked out very quickly the next day with a painting that I did right after we got off the phone. And then she said something that completely changed my life, which was, "But there's more, and I don't know how you're going to feel about it," or words to that effect. And this well before the advent of serious major research into the so-called UFO abduction phenomena, years before the term gray to describe a certain type of non-human entity had entered the language, told me about literally being lifted off the ground at the end of this sighting event and ending up in one of these craft with these beings and what had transpired. And I knew my sister well enough to know that she wasn't lying, but I had nothing to hang it on. I didn't know there was such a thing as ufology or UFO conferences or a whole world of, literature out there. But my career really went off the tracks at that point. I became obsessed with the subject. Ultimately, I found a therapist to help me normalize it to some degree, and then just began to study it, write about it, speak about it. And here I am all these years later, very involved in the work to date.
So, okay. Now I have like so many questions. I hope I remember them. And anybody that's watching, if you guys have any questions, just shoot them up and I'll throw them up for Peter. So, up until you called your sister, you didn't remember what happened. And then you remembered.
I had a break, literally 12 hours or so, back in the halcyon days of the 60s, when I was first involved in using LSD, when it was still legal, I might say, in the United States. There was a time back then where the memory broke through during that experience in a very distorted kind of way. And I actually did a series of watercolors about it. And years later, I came upon them in a portfolio and had an almost violent reaction. I tore them up and threw them away. My rationale at the time as an artist was, these are not very good drawings. They're weird. They make me feel uncomfortable. If I die, I don't want somebody to find them in, my artwork.
Right.
And then repress the memory again. I mean, that's what happened. But otherwise, 14 plus years passed without anything reactivating that memory.
There is a question before I get on to mine. I just want to be able to make sure. Peter, do you think that only certain people are chosen who actually see UFOs?
That's a great question, Betsy. I have spent time not with hundreds, but with hundreds and hundreds of people who purport to have these experiences, not just here, but in many countries around the world over the decades. And my first thought would have been initially, I have no idea. It's probably a random thing. But the in-depth research into the experiences of people through the pioneering work of people like Bud Hopkins and John Mack and Dr. David Jacobs, psychologist John Carpenter, and a handful of other extraordinary pioneers in this field, tell us in no uncertain terms that with some exceptions, they, for lack of a better term, I've never been really comfortable with the term aliens, these other intelligences, or this group of these other intelligences, more accurately, follow bloodlines. If it has happened to you, the overwhelming likelihood is that it has happened to one of your parents, and that it happened to one of their parents, and so on. Wild as that sounds.
It's actually interesting. I've never heard of that before, but that makes
It,
sense because even on the ghost or spirit side, and I don't like using the term ghost because but I always say this, that us as humans, we have to label everything, right? Really dealing with, we actually don't 100% know what
yeah.
it is, but we do have to label everything. So for the lack of that, I will say on the ghost side of things, it's you notice that when people are sensitive or they're intuitive or they can hear, see, feel, or use senses that somebody else can't, they tend to, like, their family members have been involved with the same type of a thing. So that does make sense.
Yeah. So in that sense, to answer Betsy's question, yes, in some sense of the word, these individuals are chosen.
Yeah. Um,
Overwhelmingly, not 100%.
well, if you think about you and your sister both, now, did you ever talk to your parents about it?
We sat down with our parents and had a long initial conversation with them, which remained a dialogue for the rest of our lives together. But we waited, I don't know, a week or two, maybe even a little longer, but within a month after my recovering my memory, my sister making it clear to me that she never forgot, but reminding me when my first question came up, well, why didn't we ever talk about this if you've remembered all these years? And she said, do you remember late that afternoon I came up to you? And I said, do you want to talk about this? And you said, no. And of course, I did remember that at that point. And what she said was very logical. You're my brother and I love you and I respect you. I realized this was more anxiety provoking for you, to put it mildly, than it was for me. And I respected what you said. And one day led to the next week, to the next year. And here we are. But
Yeah.
yes, we talked to our parents about it. And for the rest of their lives and my sister's life, this was something that would come up occasionally. My dad read a lot of the literature, uh, met a great deal of the personalities involved in the work. My mom was a bit more skittish about it, but took it very seriously.
Oh, good. So they were open to the idea that you guys had this experience. And that's to me, I think, is so important. When younger people do have experiences with the
Yeah.
unknown, where the parents are, you know, open and listening, as opposed to, oh, you watch too much TV, or
Well,
you
you
know.
bring up a very important point there. And working over the years and consulting with and spending time with individuals who, as part of what they're dealing with the way that a parent reacted to their bringing forth the event in question, or reflecting back on how they dealt with their child or children when they, oh, honey, you just thought it looked like that, or blah, blah, blah. Um, I went unconscious during this event, whether I was knocked out, which Helen and I agree by the forces that be, is more likely than I passed out. But when I came to, I went into the house and I walked through our living room and dining room, and there was our mom in the kitchen. This from several regressive hypnoses, which reinforced everything that I knew and added little detail. And I remember standing at the door to the kitchen. Our mom was making lunch for us, I think grilled cheese sandwiches. And there she was in right profile at the stove. And I said, I think word for word, Mom, Helen and I just saw some things in the sky over the Parker's house that looked like flying saucers from the movies. Now, many years later, when we discussed this with our parents for the first time, my mother didn't remember it. But what she did was extraordinarily correct. Whatever she was feeling, she turned and she looked at me. And I remember thinking, as she looked at me, This is the way grown-ups look at each other. And
Mm.
she, much to her credit, did not feel compelled to say anything. She was just taking it in, and I was a good kid. I was a terrible liar. I still am, which is an asset in this work. But she understood that this was very serious to me and my sister, and did not feel that she had to superimpose her own feelings, thoughts, anxieties, reactions on that moment. I wish more parents had that kind of reaction
Yeah.
rather than the protective nervousness, that often comes with a situation like the one I'm describing, or in an area of study I am not involved in. What you do in terms of otherworldly things and ghosts and spirits and the like, also to do your best to respect your children's experience.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I do tell, when we deal with private clients and stuff, they'll say, well, my 4-year-old has a imaginary friend.
I'm looking at the feed right here, and I see
Yeah.
a very thoughtful comment from Dusty. Several of our past
Yeah.
presidents have said that they would disclose, but they never do. Why do you think that is? Well, it's an excellent question, Dusty, and it's something I've studied in depth. You're referring in part to presidents like Ronald Reagan, who had at least one profoundly life-changing sighting and possibly more. Uh, Gerald Ford, whose district in Michigan, when he was a representative in Congress, was so inundated with UFO sightings, quite a number of them by people he knew and grew up with and took seriously, that he did the almost impossible and created a situation where Congress officially did an investigation. It lasted 2 effing days, so it was kind of insulting.
Yeah.
Um, Jimmy Carter, while running for governor of Georgia, was speaking at like an Elks or some kind of related service organization picnic when they had a UFO sighting. Departed from his normal text, said, if I'm elected, I will get to the bottom of this. Um, all these individuals and more hit the wall. The ridicule factor up until the last few years was so virulent, so powerful, that you could completely derail your career. Governor Richardson of the state of New Mexico, at a time a dozen years ago or so, when I worked for the state, when I worked for the city of Roswell as a consultant out of the mayor's office on events related to UFOs, and part of my job was interfacing with the governor's office. He was put on such a spot that he basically backed down. Carter had asked the head of NASA to take over UFO studies. The head of NASA at the time, I think wisely, said in so many words, Mr. President, we're having enough of a challenge getting funding from Congress, tremendous ridicule attached to this subject. I won't do that. If you want to fire me, you can. And Carter got quiet and then went into denial in public about it thereafter. So
I mean,
it's human nature.
why do you think they don't want us to know?
I
Do you
don't
think
think
it's that
that
they don't think we can handle? I mean, obviously, today's world, everybody's whining about everything. I could see us not being able to handle that, right? But I mean, let's jump back some years. I mean, do they think that we just can't handle it?
I think those individuals that I've just named and others may well have wanted us to know, but came up against such a powerful establishment of naysayers and secret keepers. Let's go back to 1947 for a moment, and the beginning of the so-called modern age of UFO sightings, which is 74 years this past week or so. President Truman, of course, was informed of all the particulars. I am sure he took it seriously as a heart attack, pulled together a team of advisors, a dozen of the smartest, sharpest people in government, science, intelligence, military, to study the subject. having read a tremendous amount of Truman's letters and speeches, and having read a lot about him over the years, as one does when you get off on tangents in your specialty work, I think he would have been willing and may have wanted to go before the American public 6 months or so later and basically just let the cat out of the bag. But I think that team of advisors, and visualize them, uh, powerful white guys who are now involved in the ultimate secret, who are probably feeling kind of pumped up that they are, being so regarded and special advisors of the president, and at the same time intimidated by the complete understanding that whatever this is, it's running circles around us. It is truly unknown. We don't know their intentions. They're technologically a zillion years ahead of us. How can we admit that we are not what we would like the world to think we are? Remember, it's at a very special moment in American history. Our involvement in World War II had helped to defeat fascism in Europe. The Marshall Plan, a very visionary and forward-thinking plan, was helping our former enemies rebuild their societies as democracy. We were, in great part, what we wish we are. We wish we were now, and are not anymore. And I think they convinced him to just continue to study it. If you think of the national security state that we live in, the origins of the secret keeping was not secrets around the nuclear bomb. It was covering up the story of truly anomalous UFOs and their implications for humanity. If you think of an oyster and how a pearl forms, it's that piece of sand that gets into the oyster and then calcifies and gets bigger, which is easier. It doesn't irritate the oyster. That, in a nutshell, is the story of the world post-war relative to this cover-up, which is now slowly unraveling and being managed. And of course, I think most of your viewers and listeners are aware. How can you not be at this point? Because we've all been so intimidated. We've all been so blasted with the information. A report was released a week or so ago by the Pentagon, 2 weeks, whatever. It was no big deal. Basically what it said, but it was a big deal, was it could be this, it could be that, it could be the Chinese, it could be the Russians, maybe not, could be us, but we don't think it's us. All the departments agree it's not us. And maybe, who knows, it might be something else. They know what's going on. This is all being stage managed, and they're going to do it for years. We're going to get reports probably a couple of times a year, each one maybe moving a little bit closer to taking extraterrestrial or interdimensional technology intelligences seriously. But I don't think our government will ever willingly admit, unless their hand is forced, to the more exotic aspects of this, namely the crash at Roswell, other crashes, recovered technology through back engineering, UFO-related abductions, hybrids, etc., which are all as real as the chairs that we're sitting on.
Right.
But it's going to be a soap opera and a game that's being played out on a number of levels. The official level, where they will do anything to stall but look like they are forthcoming. And on the unofficial level, where my colleagues and myself and more informed citizenry who are doing their homework and taking this seriously, are networking, are helping to educate each other and advancing the process at the same time.
Right. And that's it. It's interesting because for me, I love, I always say it this way because I don't know what else to call it, but the night sky. Okay. I will, every meteor shower, lunar eclipses, anything to have to do with the night sky. And I don't think I've ever seen anything. But again, that's not where my focus goes. However, when lately, when you watch the shows or you watch certain things and or news broadcasts where it's like, oh, there was the U.S. Army was flying through the air, and here's a recording of their you know audio. There was an unidentified flying object there. Then they described it. It didn't make sense. They didn't know what it was. Nothing gets that close. And like you said, they'll say, "Oh, it was the Russians. It was China. It was this. It was that." But it's never really answered.
Yeah, and again, looking at some of the terrific questions coming in.
Yeah, I'm getting there.
Yeah. Um, Basically, why don't we are ready for an awakening, a growing up, so to say,
Yeah,
an advance in our collective thinking. Um, Remember who is in power here.
yeah,
These are the people who are not thinking like this. Power is the most important thing to them, managing the information that they have. Also, if you imagine an American president, and presidents, make no mistake about it, only learn as much as the real secret keepers want them to know. The unelected people who go on generation after generation being quietly appointed, in a number of cases I'm aware of, essentially a position handed down within a family, a political family, that I would imagine every president, from the most briefed to the least briefed, depending on their relationship with the military intelligence community, are told in so many words, just hope this doesn't blow up in your administration. Ignore it, do what every other president has done, and belittle it if you need to. But now that things are changing, I still wouldn't expect, whether it was our last president or our current president or our next president, to go on television and say, my fellow Americans and by extension, citizens of the world, it's my solemn duty to inform you, blah, blah, blah. The understanding would be that if they did, they would expose every past president since Harry Truman,
right,
whether they were Democrat, Republican, conservative, liberal, as unindicted co-conspirators in the greatest cover-up in history. And the presidents and the ex-presidents club is closer than we think. It's certainly
right.
not defined by their politics.
Well, that's a game changer for sure. Um, when you started talking about how, so there was a show that came on that I started to watch, Project Blue Book. Uh, my thing is something that seemed to be so, I don't know. I don't know how to like. I don't want to say like Area 51 is like so off limits. What is Area 51? That's what people like me are like. They've got to be hiding something there, right? But like the Project Blue Book, where there seemed to be so much that he did and researched and went around and was asking questions and this like um, you have to imagine that they're letting, like you said it the right way. It's like they're letting enough out to let you feel like, yeah, we're looking into this, we agree, or we're checking things out, but you never get to that ending. You never get to that conclusion. Not you personally, but I mean all of it. Um, I didn't finish watching Project Blue Book. I did lose interest. I don't know why, because I was, trying to really I really wanted to learn about it. And I feel like another thing that sticks out for some reason to me, to be with otherworldly things would be like the Skinwalker Ranch. All kinds of stuff happened there. That's not just spirit wise, you know. Um, but do you think that they are, because I always say this, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but like I'm always like, I do believe that there are other beings in the world, but I don't think they're little green men with big black eyes and running around. You know what I mean? Like I can't imagine, what they would look like. But again, I don't think that's what they look like for some reason. I don't know. I feel like TV has made, just like it has ghost investigating or paranormal research, TV has made it very gimmicky. You know?
Well, we're on entertainment overload relative to this subject. Over the last decades, there have been so much entertainment, everything from Independence Day, they're bad and very bad, to Mars Attacks, they're very, 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 very bad and funny, to E.T., they're lovely and cute, and Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Good one.
We are overloaded with information. I've been involved in this field for more than 40 years, and I've come to a point where I wince when people, like I do a show like yours, Taryn, and I'm introduced as an expert. And I literally will always start by saying, I know you mean to compliment me, but this is like an existential oxymoron. I'm an expert in the unknown. I know how little that I really know. I'm a very pragmatic investigative writer and researcher. My specialty is not the ethereal and the lighter than air. It's stuff that I could bring into a court of law. My major mentors were a retired military scientist, a New York City police detective, and my dear friend, the late Bud Hopkins, who, like me, was a painter, but a brilliant self-trained investigator in this, and one of the most important people in the history of the field. And I was taught to triangulate on real corroborable kinds of evidences. That said, I think we're dealing with a myriad of other intelligences here. One of the questions was,
Yeah.
do I feel that they are, kind of ancient beings who've always been here with us, or visitors from parts unknown? Yes, both. Why not?
Well,
I
here's
know,
another one. Do you
yeah, I
believe
know that I don't know the answers. Also, the focus of a lot of my research over the years and colleagues has been in the abduction field, where we seem to be observing a particular civilization manifestation type of being, these ubiquitous so-called grays, who are probably laboratory created, either by themselves or, one could argue, a higher life form.
almost like Men
But
in Black?
yeah, exactly. Or, and again, that's one small area where they probably vary in their history with us, their relationship to us, their thoughts about us and how we are evolving or not evolving. And as wildly divergent as we human beings are with each other here on Earth. We have enlightened people who care about humanity. We have much more cold-hearted people who really don't give a shit and who are there for themselves. We may be somebody's graduate experiment gone horribly wrong. We may be, we are our own worst enemy.
Yeah.
We are the problem. And now, one could really bring in the subjects of things like COVID as a canary in the coal mine for climate change, which will ravage this planet. And I think also in this post-war, postmodern age, more and more as we see the world go out of our control, we long for a new pantheon of modern gods who will save us from ourselves and from the changes that nature is also supplying. And why not them? It all comes down in many ways to me to the iconic text on the X-Files poster, I Want to Believe, we all want to believe something regarding this phenomena. We want to believe what serves us, what we can tolerate, what we long for, what we fear. Um, and it helps to keep the whole subject off balance.
Hmm.
But, again, just scanning the comments here, you have a lot of thoughtful and a number of quite wise people in your audience who have obviously been turning this subject over in their minds for many years, like many of the rest of us have.
Right.
And at least we're at a moment now where, over the last 3 years or so, the media has, in great part, stopped ridiculing it. And that to me is fascinating and positive. There was a time, and you all know it, you know, at the end of a news report, the local news person or the national news person comes on and they read a report about a UFO sighting or something. And, it's wink, wink, nudge, nudge. They can't stop smirking or wanting the audience to know that they don't believe it. They just have to read it. And of course, we all know that this is explainable in other ways.
Hmm.
Um, we all also have to remain very guarded. The fact that we know something is going on beyond our understanding does not mean we should wholesale accept every reference to it. The internet is the perfect example. It's a double-edged sword. You see behind me, a large research library. I am
Right.
an analog person. I have hundreds of books on subjects that have captured my imagination over the decades, and as a writer, they're invaluable to me. Go online and you can see this cool footage of an alleged UFO, but more often than not, there's no reference to who took the footage, when it was taken, the nature of the camera, who the witnesses were, whether it was photo subjected to photo analysis, is there a history of this kind of activity in that area, and so on. There's a lot of people scamming a lot of other people for reasons that we can only make our best guesses about it. And
Hmm.
they hide behind their identities online and, create these false personas for themselves. So remember to be a very good skeptic, and especially so for people like me.
Hmm.
I've gotten scammed and it took down my career for a time. But there's a difference between being a skeptic and a debunker. A debunker has the arrogance to know that we're wrong. It can't be, therefore it isn't, therefore it must be something else. And you pathetic little believer type new age person who loves all of these funny little strange fairy tales, you're a kind of lost character and a marginal person. But I know it's not real. How? Well, I have a degree, or I'm a serious person, or I never saw one, or you know.
Hmm. Yeah. Um, and that is, I was going to ask you about, and I'm sure you get asked this a lot, but have you ever worked with or talked with, and again, if you don't want to answer, it's totally fine. Stanley Romachek, The Fire in the Sky.
Have I ever worked with
Worked with him or have
Travis Walton? Travis Walton is a good and dear friend of about almost 30 years. I helped him create his conferences. I have visited the location of these events with him and other members of the crew. I have spent time with him in Arizona. He has visited my house. I know him to be a man of character, and it really rankles me, this current wave of bullshit, of people who are dominating for the past few weeks the internet relative to the subject. Is he telling the truth? Well, fuck yes, he is.
hmm
And if you need
Or you can,
proof,
I mean, I don't mean to cut you off, but I didn't know about that. I don't know if that's like, somewhere else. The
yeah,
only reason
it's
I bring that up is
what. To cut you off for a moment, what happened was some months ago, um, a guy who was his best friend growing up, Mike Rogers, who, if you've seen the movie Fire in the Sky, um, he was wonderfully played by, I'll think of the actor's name in a moment, But he was the crew chief that day. He was driving the truck. He was the one who made the decision to take off and come back. And Travis has always made it clear that he would have done the same thing. He would have left as well. But over the years, there's been some falling out. And early this year, Mike made a statement where it was to the effect of, I didn't tell the truth in saying that Travis was telling the truth. And it really was a very sad episode between two people who've known each other for a long time, a certain amount of jealousy. And not long after that, he made a public statement apologizing for questioning it because he knew it was true. He was there, he saw it. But again, maybe it's good to bring it up, even though you weren't leading to this,
Yeah.
that over the past week, I can't go 20 minutes online without seeing some zilch in their chair saying, I don't believe Travis Walton. Mike said, blah, and other people piping in like they have any idea of what really happened that day. Let me say it this way. People often ask me my opinion, as you are, about certain aspects of this subject. If I'm familiar with what we're talking about, I will give you my opinion. But I don't believe, like a lot of people, that everybody has a right to an opinion just because they're an American and we can have an opinion on anything. I actually feel you should have enough knowledge, enough information to have an informed opinion.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have opinions on certain things if I don't know enough about them to have an opinion that matters. And I would suggest to any of your viewers, if they're aware of the situation I'm talking about, or if they just want to see an absolutely brilliant 5 years in the making, scientific, well corroborated, multiple award-winning feature-length documentary, check out Travis, the true story of Travis Walton. You can watch it on Amazon Prime. You can watch it on,
I'm going to watch that. That sounds good.
It's terrific. And I should say here, in the interest of full disclosure, I was an associate producer on this documentary. I'm one of the talking heads who appears on camera, but that should in no way affect your opinion.
Right.
All of the scientific evidence is presented, psychological profiles, FBI profiles, the reality, not just of polygraph, because you can beat a polygraph. But when you have 5 people corroborating each other on a polygraph, the odds of that statistically go off the charts completely. Again, Travis, the true story of Travis Walton. It's also available at 1 or 2 other locations online for streaming, and it's a DVD that's also available. But again, most people prefer, not most, that's not fair. Many people prefer to have an opinion and just, get into other people's faces rather than take the time even to watch an hour and a half documentary.
Right.
And to understand that their opinion is not based on anything
education
grounded.
or not. Right.
Yeah.
And what I was going to say was I met Travis Walton once, mind you. And when I met him, there's just, it was like, I don't know what it was. But it was like this automatic belief trust. And he actually he was going to be on stage to do a lecture. And it brings me back to what you said in the very beginning, because that's the first thing that popped in my head when you said about how people as yourself and Travis Walton who want to come out and tell their story, of things that have happened to them, and at one point where it was something that was uncomfortable, or you were bashed, or I remember him on stage and they had this blow up fake alien thing on the stage, and he said, I need that removed. You can tell he still is affected,
Yeah.
as yourself, to what happened to him, you know? And I've never gone through anything like that, but, and I can't imagine that being something that you can just like, oh, okay, it is what it is, whatever. I'm gonna move on with life and have a great life, you know? It totally changes your entire perspective about life.
You know, anybody with an intention can fake just about anything. But I am on record here, and if my reputation were to go down because of anything I said relative to this, that's fine with me. We're talking here about a man of character
Mm-hmm.
who, if you watch this documentary, you will realize the hell his life was put through and his family's life was put through. Remember that he wasn't just taken, and this was November of 1975, very, very different time. This is a guy from a very small town in Arizona, population about 5,000, Mormon family. Everybody knows everybody, who not only was knocked unconscious by a blue beam of light with the witnesses, 50 feet away or whatever, seeing it, but who then was missing for 5 full days at a time when the weather was such and there were no little cabins in the area. The Sitgrave National Forest covers parts of 3 states. It is wilderness. I have been there. If you're lost, you would probably disappear forever. The debunkers who have said he hid out in a cabin, this was all a ruse to get attention or to make money, they'd be funny if they weren't so insulting. And nobody, no sane person would ever want to bring this on themselves.
Right.
Also, remember that these other young guys who were with him, what did they do? They went to local law enforcement, knowing, obviously, that they wouldn't be believed, but they weren't going to lie about it. This is actually in the film Fire in the Sky, which many of you have seen. You should be aware that the original script by Tracy Torme, another friend and a great writer, was really screwed around with by the studio. A man named Brandon Tartikoff, who was the head of whatever studio it was at the time, and who was basically kicked upstairs from his post at head of NBC at the time. We're talking about a guy who was lucky enough to be a head of NBC at the beginning of Saturday Night Live. So he looked great. And he wasn't terribly competent, but he got promoted. And he wanted something wilder and weirder than the story, which is wilder enough.
Right.
And both Travis and Tracy pleaded with him to leave the script alone. I mean, they were already on location working. And this is a fair, I think, important digression, because some of the film is very good and others of it is complete bullshit. And what he said was, if you don't make the changes I want, I will close down this set and X number of actors and tech people will be without a job and I'll lose a couple of million, but that's okay.
Oh, wow.
So they made changes. One of the things about the documentary that's very important is that it tells the true story. But in the movie, one of the things I thought was very good was Sheriff Gillespie, who passed several years ago, who took the subject seriously. But you'll see him in an interview. He actually talked about this off camera and then died a few months later, unfortunately. He made it clear that he took it seriously because he had had an incident not that much longer earlier than Travis's incident. But you're in Arizona, you're a lawman, you're not going to say I believe in flying saucers and aliens. Anyway, he was wonderfully played by the great late James Garner. And we see this lawman knowing that it's more likely that, these rough and tumble guys who hunt on weekends, who are outdoor guys, who are working with chainsaws during the day and, all pretty macho guys. Maybe there was somebody got in somebody's face. Maybe things escalated. Maybe there was a tragedy, an accident. Travis got killed. They buried the body. The likelihood for the logical mind, mine included, was that something like this probably happened more likely than that he was abducted by aliens. And so it's important to remember that there were reporters, not just from all over America, but from all over the world in little Snowflake, Arizona, within 24 hours of this story, because it made not just national, but international news. Alleged alien abduction, murder, this is as good as it gets. And that's what he walked back into when he was returned 5 days later. I don't want to spend too much more time on this except to say Travis's story is an incredibly important one. His book is very worth reading. He is out there now that the conference circuit is opening up more. If you do ever have an opportunity to hear him speak live or to meet him, do. He's a great guy and a very decent person and a family man, and he didn't ask for this. However, he has grown into an incredibly articulate, very thoughtful world spokesman for the reality of this subject.
Yeah. I mean, and it's, I mean, to have the courage to keep going after being put through so much, you know what I mean? To help those that may, and that was one of my questions too. So somebody had asked, because I'm interested too, do you find that sightings are abductions very rare? And are sightings, or do they tend to be almost like are they mostly in Arizona? Are they mostly in Oklahoma? Are they in, are they in more desolate areas? Are they, you know,
It's funny you should mention that right now. A few months ago, this monster book came out. It's called UFO Sightings Desk Reference United States of America 2001 to 2020. It is thousands of statistics on UFO sightings. Overall, it is a worldwide phenomena. It is incredibly common. And certainly up until, we kind of took off at hyperspeed technologically and developed more and more sophisticated aircraft and technology that is still veiled in secrecy. And we're talking about analog kind of, propeller driven aircraft. Still, the likelihood was that UFO, a unidentified flying object, ultimately could be explained in more conventional terms than exotic terms. Not that there weren't a lot of exceptions. That's still the case to a degree, although I think people who are very romantically involved in the subject prefer to think that anything in the night sky that behaves in a way that they've never seen is from off Earth. Well, we have stuff in the air now that we can only, those of us who are not technologically involved, who don't have security clearances, can only wonder about.
Right.
But it is a worldwide phenomenon. It's all over the world. After the Soviet Union fell, we then learned, as Russia started to declassify materials around this subject, that they were as concerned that this might be American super secret technology as we were concerned it was Soviet technology, and that they still had the same general number of true unknowns that we're faced with. I think the abduction phenomena is not only...
Is that common in your research? Like, is that more common than what we know of?
Much more common than I'm comfortable with. I think everybody who is listening, who is watching right now, knows at least one person that this has happened to, unless they've been living under a rock or, live in an incredibly small, isolated community. It's that common. I wouldn't even dream of giving you a statistic, but that person is not talking to you about it,
right?
Because of fear of being judged, but they have the scars, they have the implants, they have the memories, as do maybe their mother and their grandmother. It stays very in-house. I am approached by these people very regularly, often just to have somebody to talk to verify certain aspects of their experience. I have no vested interest in convincing people this has happened to them to support some loopy belief of mine. I am a very objective person, but you don't have to be a paranoid to know that somebody is following you, as the old expression goes. It's
Sure.
real. It happens much more than we are comfortable with. And the likelihood is you know somebody that it's happened to, believe it or not.
There's a question. Does Peter believe that there is any correlation between UFOs and timelines and possible rips in timelines or dimensions, which may account for spirits or ghosts?
That's a great question. I noticed it. And that is a perfect question where I can say without hesitation, I don't know. I have no idea whatsoever.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, do you think that it's possible?
Anything is possible,
This is
especially in
true.
the work
This
that
is
I
true.
do.
Yeah.
Also, for what it's worth, many people who have been through the kinds of experiences we're talking about here, or had close encounters, or are particularly psychic or empathic, they're open to other experiences. There was a time when that was used to mock people. I remember early on in my public work, and I don't even think it was meant in a mean-spirited way, but just sort of an insensitive kind of curiosity of, oh, you're into UFOs, are you into ghosts and hauntings and ancient mysteries and blah, 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 blah. Well, some yes, some no, but I would often put out publicly no, because I knew that being associated, oh, you're into all that weird stuff, how seriously can I take, your UFO writing and public talks and appearances in the media?
So I'm gonna say this. Like, I believe that there was some type of a higher power, which wherever that came from, with all these when you say ancient, the Egyptian, the statues, like, to me, I look at that and the human man. I don't care how strong you are. I don't care how tall you are. I don't care how, like, and especially with the lack of tools back then. I can't imagine a human being being able to create such magnificent, perfect, you know, structures. I mean,
I To cut you off for a moment, I absolutely respect what you're saying. I subscribe to the idea that at our best, literally anything that the mind of human beings can conceive, they have the potential of achieving. Let's talk about the pyramids for a moment. 500 million blocks weighing on an average of 2.5 tons each, perfectly capped, etc., and other archaeological wonders. I have seen engineering schematics done by very involved, very thoughtful engineers of showing how, number one, the idea of, rolling big pieces of stone on logs, basic rollers. You're going to do that in the desert. Where you're
right.
going to get the trees, sand doesn't work like that, but showing how pulley systems with, X number of hundreds of people pulling on ropes of a certain density with sand graded temporarily up to a certain area with, I think it's not out of the question. The writings of Eric von Daniken, who really is kind of the godfather in a way of so much of the interest in this, going back to Chariots of the Gods, published in the mid 60s. Eric, who is a great guy and a great character, he is pretty amazing. And he's still kicking ass now in his 80s. I mean, the guy
Oh,
is, he's
wow.
awesome. But he ignited the public imagination. Eric wasn't some kind of PhD, physicist or something. He was a Swiss German reporter. And he got this bug in his bonnet. And I think it's naive to think, number one, that they or all of the theys started coming or manifesting themselves in this plane in 1947. Of course, they've been coming and going since time immemorial, as far as I'm concerned. However, the show Ancient Aliens has
Mhm.
gone a long way to popularize the notion that just about anything that you and I feel challenged to do is probably done by aliens.
Mhm.
Giorgio is an old friend. I'm very happy for his success. I've been a guest on the show, and I think some of their programming has been brilliant. I only wish they had named the show something else, because after several seasons, they kind of ran out of ancient alien constructs. Or an example for me would be, here's a 19,000-year-old Australian Aborigine cave drawing, and it shows a round head and big black eyes and lines coming off it. Oh my God, it's an alien. Well, if you're predisposed to believe that, fine. My
Right.
first thought is not necessarily. The eyes of an individual have been darkened with charcoal. They're wearing a simple wooden armature with sticks coming off it for some ancient, long forgotten ceremony. Is that more probable and more logical than an alien intervention? For me, the answer is yes. Not that such things didn't happen, not that their idea is a bad one. I mean, the show that I appeared on had to do with Russia's relationship with space. And unlike America, goes back to the 19th century, and quite a number of remarkable, brilliant mystics and scientists who saw space as the destiny of Russia. And in the old Soviet Union days, it wasn't just informed by engineering, as it was here, and a go get 'em spirit and, competitiveness, and we got to beat them there. It was informed by an almost mystical belief and commitment to getting into space first, because that was part of our destiny. Fascinating show. But again, Ancient Aliens is just a name. I think it still is one of the more consistently interesting programs. I should also say, it might shock people, I don't watch most of this television stuff. I'm
Yeah.
way behind the curve. You guys are probably much more knowledgeable about all the newest shows. I spend my time doing other things, but
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously you're very busy. I mean, do people contact you for help and guidance? Uh,
reg- regularly.
okay.
And I do
But
my
is that
best.
something that you do? You try to help and try to guide.
Well, sometimes it's just a matter of being a good listener. I'm not a very practical person. I'm quite idealistic. I make no money doing any of those things. Um, I correspond with people who need some validation. Where possible, I will link people up who want to explore what they feel is a valid contact experience or possibly an abduction experience with a qualified and competent mental health professional or hypnotherapist. But I don't deal with charlatans. I have nothing to prove here, and I have nothing personally to gain. I care about people. They're more important to me than the lurid details of this subject. Of course, like everybody, I wonder where this group is from or that group is from, and what powers their craft, and what life is like in their dimension, and what their motivations are, or what life is like in, their part of the cosmos. But I'm more interested in this part of my life in us human beings and how we're dealing with this. I consider myself an educator. I have worked as a teacher on and off, well, for a period of time when I was younger, for about 15 years, specifically an art and painting instructor. I've taught at every level from first grade to postgraduate level. And we need folks in this field now who are grounded, who can assist people in taking that next step into responsibly educating themselves about what may or may not be going on now. Some of your viewers know there are a lot of very colorful personalities in my field,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of healthy egos banging against each other, a lot of people who are driven by the desire to be well known, as opposed to the desire to work fairly quietly in the background and assist as they're able. For me, my main vehicle, certainly the past 6 months, has been something that I've been leading up to doing in a way for 40 plus years, which is I am a host of a weekly live old-fashioned radio show that once the episode is archived, I guess it's a podcast by definition. The show is called Meanwhile Here on Earth. It's on a station out of Utah called KGRA. KGRA is now doing a lot of reorganizing, and in the not too distant future, you will only be able to see the first half hour of my 2-hour shows for free, and then you've got to become a subscriber. But I will tell you right now that there is a back door, and if you want to see what I've been doing the past half year, and I've got about 25 or so shows archived, go on YouTube, type in KGRA, and then Meanwhile Here on Earth, and you can watch all those shows for free for a little while longer. Also, I have given myself a dual mandate. Obviously, I would love to have the audience that every big show has, and the people that listen to and watch every small podcast. I'd like to have everybody that tunes in every night for Coast to Coast, or my friend Jimmy Church's show. I'm building an audience, but equally, if not more important to me, is people who have never even considered watching a UFO or paranormal related broadcast or gone to a paranormal or UFO conference. Those are the people I'm really after. And so rather than have my better known colleagues come on and do wonderfully well what they do on a lot of my friend shows of, what do you think about the Tic Tac case, or what's your opinion on disclosure, or which I do anyway. I ask most of them, and this is all worked out beforehand, many of us, know who you are in the most superficial sense. We've read some of your books, we've seen you in documentaries, we've heard you at conferences, but how did you become the person you are? And I give them 2 hours to tell us their life stories, almost always heavily illustrated. That, for me, is a better way to meet somebody that you then may say, that was interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't feel as intimidated now or like an outsider. I will read one of that person's books. Or if they're speaking at a conference in my community, I'd like to hear them live. I'm now interested in a more grounded way. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And that is exactly why I wanted you to come on. I am not well versed in the UFO or whatever you want. I'm not. I just have not done a lot of research on it. I haven't watched a lot of shows, and I will go on record saying I've never watched Ancient Aliens. I'm sure everybody's like, what? I shared the memes when they had the funny memes that were coming out and stuff, which I thought was funny, yeah. So that's why I wanted to have you on, because because a lot of my friends that I circle with that do, that we are, paranormal and so to speak, we do our research of ghost investigating and stuff like that. They all are like real hard, they believe in the cryptozoology stuff, and they believe in they believe in all of that, but they all think it's all related, all the same circle somehow, some way, which I believe if it exists. I'm not ignorant to that. It's the universe is endless. There's the oceans. I mean, have you ever heard of anybody claiming from the sea or the ocean? Where they
Oh yes, it's a whole separate area of study. Underwater unidentified objects. The Navy has been studying this for decades. and there are several very fine studies on it. It's almost naive to think that if you've developed a craft that can traverse space and go at hyper speeds that, would tear a conventional pilot's head off, that the thing isn't waterproof. I mean, when the Navy tracks something underwater going 70 miles an hour underwater with the actual, even think about a bullet underwater. It goes a very short distance and stops and drops. 70 miles an hour underwater, that's insane. And there have been ever so many sightings of craft emerging from water or diving into bodies of water. This is absolutely a legitimate area of study, and there's no question about it.
Yeah, Jocelyn had asked it earlier, and I kept meaning to ask you because I thought that was interesting. I myself have never heard of, the only thing you ever really hear are like these creatures, Loch Ness or, something,
Sure.
Along those lines.
Very different.
Yes. And I respect that maybe that exists too. I don't know. I mean, I watch The Unexplained with William Shatner. I do watch that show. That show is very interesting. And that to me, I feel like that just covers all the aspects. Like, okay, here's like the scientific, here's like the unknown of it, here's this, here's that. Could it be, and it still leaves us. I mean, I'm happy we haven't found answers because our research keeps going and, we keep learning. And I feel like this is what we have to do, maybe to get to, like, what would happen one day if you just sat down with an extraterrestrial and just started having a conversation and everything would, like, what drives you every day, would be like, okay, we figured it out. Now what? Right? I say the same thing. I'm like, if I were to be able to sit, which is what we want to do, we want that. But then what?
I think also it's worth mentioning. I know when I got involved in this subject years ago with something beyond a passion, again, I couldn't shut it off, and that's not a healthy thing. I do it now by choice. But the idea of power to the people, tell us the truth, we can handle it, kill all secrecy. Well, there are legitimate reasons to keep certain secrets, but it got me to thinking over time, what if, we could answer all of these questions? And the likelihood is that within our lifetimes, we're not going to be able to do that any more than the great religious mysteries if you are a person of faith. And essentially, how boring life would be without mysteries, especially for some of us who, we're living our lives, we're paying our bills, we have our families, other interests. I have quite a number of other passions and interests as well. I read a great deal. I'm a movie maniac. I love to travel. Hasn't been much of that recently, but we're all in this together. And if nothing else, a serious contemplation that we are not alone in the universe or even on our own planet in terms of beings one dimension away who are sitting right next to us right now enjoying the broadcast, I hope, that a public acknowledgement, and we may have to create it for ourselves with a critical mass of the population nationally and internationally to cross that threshold, because even though the American government is now following the pretense of revealing certain things, again, this is a theatrically staged show that will drag on, if they have their way, for time immemorial. That the potential for seeing ourselves first as human beings and not necessarily first as Americans or Brazilians or Israelis or Iranians or Russians or whatever, not necessarily first as men or women, or Christians or Jews or Muslims or agnostics or atheists or black or white or Asian or any other permutation of racial background,
Right.
that we could actually begin to see ourselves as human beings first is very dangerous to world governments because they operate off of nationalism. And it's almost treasonous to suggest that you think of yourself as a citizen of the world. You know, we're just past 4th of July. We all celebrated the independence of this very young, still trying to figure things out, extremely fortunate, flawed republic that we are a part of here. And so, once again, there's a reason to try to keep us separated. But every one of us that takes this subject seriously is now part of something larger than ourselves in a healthy way. And I subscribe to that idea 100%.
Yes, I agree. And I mean, I feel like I just want to keep talking to you. There's like so much. Dustin said about he can't get over the ancient inscriptions that seemingly portray what appears to be modern aircraft.
In fact, I know exactly what Dustin is talking about there. If it's the same reference to a certain series of Egyptian hieroglyphics that are uncanny in their look to modern fighter aircraft, helicopters, submarines, and they are authentic. I don't know what to make of them. Another wonderful mystery. We may well have repeated our behavior, and those images that are thousands of years old may be harking back to a time 30,000 years ago, before a post-industrial civilization finally blew itself up and took a great deal of its artifacts, or almost all of them, with them, except the oral traditions. We don't know. And I would just say, as a watchword, when you encounter people or public figures who say, I know, this group has been coming here for 457,000 years, and their propulsion systems are this, and they come from this dot in the universe or this area in the center of the earth, and this is their philosophy, and this is what they have for breakfast, etc. Who am I to say they're not right? That's part of the conundrum of this work. It's as difficult often to prove any theory, no matter how grounded or harebrained it is incorrect, as it is to put forward something you feel is rational, grounded, and well-researched, that it's true to somebody, especially who doesn't want to believe it. And yes, we could talk about this well into the night. Let's do this, though. If you would, Taryn, post a link to our show tonight on my Facebook page, so some of my friends can start to be your friends.
Yes, absolutely.
And, in a couple of months, I'll come back and we'll pick up where we left off.
Can I just, somebody asked, I must have missed this. Can I just ask you this? Sorry, Dana. She said, can I ask my question again? Do you have any thoughts on the Project Blue Beam conspiracy? I don't know anything about it, so this is.
I was going to say, I've heard of it, but I don't know the particulars. Once again, a person in my position probably should. So there's another question that I can look you in the eye of the camera and say, I haven't a clue. I don't know. I should probably do some homework on it and learn enough about it.
When you come back, we'll talk about it.
To have an opinion. Yes, exactly.
Quick question. Favorite movie?
Impossible. I've been in love with movies since I was 6 or 7 years old. When I was a student at the School of Visual Arts, my major was painting. My minor was film history. If my life had moved a little differently, I would have spent my life in film. I could give you my 50 favorites in silent films, 30s, 40s, 50s films where everything explodes and everybody dies. I don't have a favorite film. I have many, many favorite films.
I know. It is a hard question. It is.
Also, let me just say again, listen to my program. It's you can listen to it live for free, but most of the shows are heavily illustrated. And once they go to a full subscription basis after the first half hour, with the code that they give me, it'll be like $5 and change a month. And I don't believe in false modesty any more than false praise. I think I'm doing pretty good as a broadcaster. Again, I bring more than 40 years of experience and a lot of wonderful guests with me.
Mhm.
The show again is Meanwhile Here on Earth. It's on KGRA, Monday, 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I hope you'll join me there.
Yes, I'm definitely going to check it out. I'm also going to check out your documentary that I never knew existed.
It's not mine. I was just an
Well,
associate producer. But
yeah,
again, Travis, the true story of Travis Walton.
I
It's
will check.
first class.
Yeah, I will definitely check that out. Um, I sorry, I have one more question. I'm sorry, and then I'll let you go. I
Sure.
promise. Do you still have experiences or still feel, you know what I mean, that things have happened? Have you had run-ins with you when, because I've heard though, once that happens, it continues to happen for you. Not you,
Well, I think you and your viewers will be woefully disappointed. I had this profoundly life-changing, unambiguous UFO sighting as a kid. My sister was the one that had the experience, though. I have had one other profound UFO sighting, multiple, and that was in England in February 1988, and beginning to fully research a case that ended up in a best-selling book in England that was years later discredited in part because my co-author turned out to be a sociopathic,
oh,
psychopathic
uh,
liar.
oh, that's
And
cool.
the book is out of print as it should be now, but I'm very proud of parts of it. I have had a handful of genuinely paranormal experiences, but my history is a cupcake compared to so many people I've met and spent time with and been able to, in every way that we can, confirm
Yeah.
or read evidences that, for me, beyond any reasonable doubt, confirm their claims of their experiences, no matter how wild and out of the norm they sound.
What about your sister? Did your sister, when you guys started to talk, did she say that she continued to have experiences or
I
interact?
wish. My sister passed away in January of 2000. I miss her very much, but she packed more into 50 years than most people will in 100. And for any punk music devotees, my sister was part of that first wave of punk music coming out of clubs like CBGB's. She opened for the Talking Heads and Iggy and the Ramones. And
Oh, cool.
gosh, her performing name was Helen Wheels, and she was performed with a band called the Helen Wheels Band for 10 years, was a gold and platinum record award-winning songwriter for the Blue Oyster Cult, wrote for a lot of other groups. She was absolutely amazing and a force of nature unto herself.
Wow, that's awesome. That's awesome. You have so many layers. So many
I
layers.
am the only person you will ever meet, certainly in ufology, who is not a member of the group, the Blue Oyster Cult, who has sung Don't Fear the Reaper with them on stage.
Mm, wow, impressive.
And I have a gold and platinum record as well.
Wow. Wow. Well, I am very honored to have you on my show.
I've enjoyed it.
And
And
I hope you come on again. And I really do. I really do hope you come on again. I know that it's it's my own little rinky dink thing, but I love it, and I love getting people like you on. Um, um,
I'm a fan now too, and I love that you do it out of your bedroom. You're the real deal. So keep doing what you're doing, and I'll be back.
Thank you so much, and thank you. And I'm going to check everything out, and I hope everybody that watched goes to your pages and reads, get your books, and subscribes to your YouTube and all that stuff. I think it'd be awesome, and we'll have to catch up so we can set another date because I would love to have
Yes.
you on again, and maybe
Would
bring
love.
one of your one of your circle people, somebody that you work with, on, or somebody you do your show with or whatever, but
I do
definitely.
my show on my own, but I'm glad to recommend your show to colleagues.
Oh, thank you. Um, I have so much more. Okay, we'll schedule another date. Thank you so much, Peter. I appreciate you coming on. Thank you. Good
I
night.
enjoyed it. Bye.
Good night. Wow. Now, because I don't know so much, I'm like I didn't know. I'm so happy that a lot of you asked some really, really good questions. Dustin and Jossie and Dana. Oh my God, thank you so much. Betsy, thank you. Obviously I'm not very well versed in the subject. He is. And now that I see him, he looks so familiar to me. I can't think of where I would have seen him anywhere. Maybe on a show or something. I have no idea. But that was interesting. I wanted to ask about MUFON, and I wanted to ask about, how he, if he works with them and, this and that. But hopefully I will get him on again, and we can talk some more. And I just want to look really quick who I have on next week, because that's something that I said I was going to do. I want to, next week on the brew, I have, let me see. Sorry, give me a second. I apologize. Oh, Alfred from Bronxville Paranormal Society will be on, and we will be on next week at 7:30 again. I'm probably going to butcher his last name, but I don't mean to. I'm sorry, Al. I'm very sorry. Santariga. But he's from Bronxville Paranormal Society, and he will be joining me next week. So that should be a really, really good show. Again, I appreciate Todd. Thank you, everybody. Sid, everybody that joined me, a Skeeter, everybody that jumped in and just showed some love. Thank you so much. I love you guys. And I will see you next week. Oh, I'll be live in Gettysburg this weekend. I'm going to Gettysburg with SRS Paranormal, Matt Sorge, and Al. And we are going to be, going through the park and doing the little investigations here and there. So I will go live on Paranormal Brew as we are going through the park. So before my show next week, I will be live in Gettysburg with SRS Paranormal from Tennessee. They're going to come up and join me in Gettysburg, and we're going to run around the park and around the town, and who knows what's going to happen. So but watch the show. Rachel, hi everybody. But watch and join me this weekend. Okay, love you guys.